In Illinois, springtime brings softer morning light. Even though there aren't enough people in my kitchen to track in dirt, the sun floods over my window and warms the floor tiles, which I sweep every day. Steam rises in small wisps from the black coffee as I set my chipped cup on the counter. The home is not empty, but it is quiet. It shares my breath. This stillness is mine, including the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the wood. However, even tranquility has a memory. On mornings like these, the past comes back to us with a jarring clarity. I'm transported back 5 years to that scene in Ronan's kitchen, where the aroma of the tamales I had woken up to prepare at 4 in the morning contrasted with the perfume of store-bought candles. The day was Christmas Eve. I carefully wrapped each tamale, cooked them to perfection, and brought them over while still warm. It was meant to be a loving gesture. Rather, it turned into a lingering recollection. Like a prince in his castle, Ronan sat at the granite kitchen island and scrolled through his phone. Nearby, his wife Cambria sipped something frothy from a mason jar that cost more than I earned in a day cleaning houses. Grinning, I set the plate on their counter. Ronan didn't raise his gaze. Like a kid attempting to impress, I said, "These are homemade." Cambria smiled tightly. "Yes, this week we are attempting to eat a clean diet." Ronan eventually looked at the platter, picked one up, took a mouthful, and then chided me for wanting too much with that expression that always made me feel 15 again. "These taste like rent food, Mom." He laughed. I didn't comprehend. I said, "Rent food." "Well," he shrugged. Cambria laughed at that time, like the things impoverished people eat. Nor a harsh laugh, nor a loud one. Even worse, they treated me dismissively and quietly, as if I were a stray dog slogging over their shiny floor. That was the time. Nor the laughter, nor the words. It was the way Ronan stated it without even flinching. As though making fun of me was as normal as breathing, as though I were inferior. I had worked in other people's kitchens for decades until my feet started to bleed. I used a toothbrush to clean baseboards for women who had never heard my name. I smiled despite caring for dying men who thought I was their daughter. Ronan was grinning over my food as I sold tamales in church parking lots to cover his field trip expenses, telling me that I would never be greater than I already was. He said, looking at Cambria for impact, "You own a house. Be honest." At first, that sentence didn't hurt. It sunk heavily and slowly. I shared their laughter. What I remember most is that I nodded and laughed along with it. I answered, "I'll take these then," and folded the foil over the other tamales. "Don't worry," as though I still had something to offer. I sobbed silently in my apartment's corner that evening. The heater made a dying rattling sound. Ceiling paint peeled off. The sink was dripping. However, I didn't examine any of that. I said, "Get real," as I gazed at my reflection in the glass. To be honest, I had no idea what real looked like. I have never had more than a survival dream. Right up until that evening. The seed then took root on its own. Nobody heard it establish itself. However, it expanded. And 4 years later, as I stood in the backyard of a house with a sagging fence and broken tiles, I murmured back to my reflection, this time in a mirror that hung on my wall rather than a window. Look at me now. The winter wind had tormented my coat like it had a vendetta against the impoverished on the day I saw Mr. Redman. As usual, I was early. According to the service, he required full-time assistance with food, cleaning, lighting, and medical support. The type of job you take when you're too broke to quit working yet too elderly for heavy labor. Wearing mismatched socks and a heavy wool jacket, he opened the door. Even though the rest of him was shaking, his eyes remained focused. He said, "Selena," as if I weren't what he had anticipated. "Yes, sir," I said, immediately looking around the floors to see where I should begin cleaning. However, unlike most others, He did not wave me in as if I were invisible. Gently, he moved aside. Enter. First, let's drink some tea. For work, it's too chilly. It had been years since anyone had said anything like that to me. I will never acknowledge how much that job rescued me. I got out of bed early every weekday, prepared a one-handed lunch, and drove my beat-up vehicle across town. I cooked him breakfast, folded his laundry, read him the newspaper aloud. Sometimes he'd nod off mid-article, and I'd just keep reading to the silence, to the warmth, to remind myself I still had a voice. One afternoon, when I was scrubbing the base of his bathtub, he shuffled in and said, "You clean like it's a prayer?" I paused. It kind of is. He didn't ask what I meant, and I didn't explain. That job paid me less than I deserved, but more than I'd earned anywhere else. And Mr. Redmond treated me like I was made of something precious, not disposable. That mattered more than money. On the weekends, I sold tamales and sweetbread at the flea market. In the summers, I offered to wash windows and pull weeds for the neighbors in my apartment complex. I skipped meals. I wore the same 2 pairs of shoes until the soles gave out. I never bought anything that wasn't gas groceries or rent. I kept a tin under the floorboards with every tip, every dollar saved, from saying no to things I wanted. That tin became heavy. Grief had already worn itself into the walls of my life. My husband Elias died of a heart attack in the break room of a manufacturing plant when Ronan was 12. One minute he was making jokes with coworkers. The next minute, the world folded. I didn't cry much then. I didn't have time. There was rent due and a boy to feed. I became mother and father, punishment and comfort, paycheck and prayer. Ronan was quiet after that. Withdrawn, he started looking at me like I owed him something more than my exhaustion. I worked so he could have shoes without holes. I cleaned bathrooms so he could go on school trips. I lied to the school about doctor appointments just so I could take a shift. I thought all of it, would lead to something better for him. Maybe it did, but it never changed how he looked at me. 4 years into caring for Mr. Redmond, he passed away in his sleep, peaceful, alone, but not lonely. In his will, he left a small bonus for me, a gesture, not a fortune, but enough to combine with what I'd saved. It pushed me over the line. I bought a modest villa on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, old Spanish tile, a garden out back already half-grown wild. The ceilings were low. The paint flaked in places, but it was mine. On move-in day, I stood in the doorway with the keys pressed into my palm, the metal warm from my grip. "No one," I whispered, "no one can take this from me." And then I started planting tomatoes. It was a Thursday just after noon, and I had been kneeling in the garden, trimming the basil when I heard the gate creak open. No knock, no call ahead, just the sound of footsteps and the low buzz of voices growing louder. I stood, wiped my hands on my pants, and turned toward the back porch. There they were, Ronan's sunglasses on his head, wearing that smile that used to melt me when he was 5 and wanted candy. And Cambria's arms crossed loosely, her phone half hidden in her hand, as though this visit might bore her at any moment. She wore white pants and heels completely unfit for my gravel walkway, and yet she walked across it like it already belonged to her. Mom, Ronan said, stepping forward. We were just in the neighborhood. I looked past him. Their SUV was parked crooked on my curb, its engine still ticking with heat. "I didn't know you were coming," I said quietly. Cambria laughed. "Surprises are fun, right?" They didn't wait for an invitation. They slipped past me like smoke and stepped into my kitchen as if it had always been theirs. Ronan opened the fridge immediately, letting the cold air spill out. "You still buy this off-brand yogurt," he said, holding up the container. "Wow." Cambria wrinkled her nose. "We'll need to replace all the appliances, babe. This stove looks like something from a time capsule." I stood in the doorway, still holding my garden shears. Ronan glanced around. I mean, it's cozy, he offered. But it needs upgrades. You shouldn't be trying to cook with that old range. Gas is dangerous at your age. At my age? Cambria trailed her fingers across the counter and walked into the hallway. I followed them slowly. She peeked into the guest room, my reading room, and then into the second bedroom. She could sleep here, she said softly, not knowing I was standing right behind her, like a housekeeper, but family. You know, Ronan chuckled. Yeah, it'd be easier than moving her somewhere far. The words didn't hit me all at once. They settled like ash, slow, powdery, suffocating. When Cambria turned and saw me, she didn't flinch, just smiled. We were thinking long term. With the kids growing, we really need the space. And it's not safe for you to live alone, Selena. They ushered me back into the kitchen. Ronan opened his satchel and pulled out a glossy folder. Brochures spilled onto the table, photos of smiling seniors playing bingo-eating gelatin desserts under pastel lighting. This place is highly rated, he said, tapping the brochure. Medical staff meal plans activities. You'll love it. Cambria pulled out a second folder. Papers tabs marked with yellow post-its. We've done the hard work. All you'd need to do is sign. We'd sell the house, put it in a trust cover the care facility, and whatever's left you could use for personal expenses. She said it so sweetly as though this was a kindness, a gift, as if stripping me of my home, my routine, my garden, my independence was something I should thank her for. I looked at the papers, then at their faces, and I said nothing. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I watched as Cambria leaned back in my chair, crossed her legs like she owned the air between us. I watched Ronan flip another brochure open, pointing to the spa services like they'd erase my instincts. Their voices filled the kitchen, discussing logistics timelines, movers, as though I were a ghost haunting her own life. I walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and began rinsing the dirt from my hands. Let them talk. Let them plan. Because I wasn't finished listening. Not yet. It had been 3 days since Ronan and Cambria had stormed through my home like it was a showroom, speaking of me as if I were already gone. Since then, the house had been unusually still. No calls. No texts. Just the occasional glance out the window, half expecting their SUV to pull up again. I found myself double-checking the lock on the gate, then laughing softly at myself. Not out of fear, out of something else. Something harder, sharper. That afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway I didn't recognize. It was clean-polished, but not flashy. A man stepped out tall, early 40s, wearing a navy suit with no tie. He had the kind of posture that told you he knew how to speak in courtrooms. But his face. Something about it stirred a memory I hadn't touched in years. Mrs. Duarte, he asked gently. Yes, I'm Darius Redman. My father was Thomas Redman. You cared for him the last 4 years of his life. I set down the watering can and wiped my hands on my apron. You were the son who visited every Sunday. The law student. He smiled. And you were the woman who kept him alive longer than any of us expected. I let him inside without needing to ask why he was here. He didn't comment on the mismatched cushions or the scuffed floor tiles. He sat at the kitchen table like he'd been there a dozen times before. I was contacted yesterday, he said, by a man named Ronan Duarte. He wanted a consultation on elder guardianship, how to declare a parent mentally incapacitated in order to gain legal control of their assets. I felt the breath leave my body before I even realized I'd been holding it. He said you were showing signs of confusion. Darius continued, his voice calm but firm. He was looking into filing a petition to assume legal and financial responsibility for you. He paused, letting the words settle. I told him I'd need medical evaluations, documented evidence, and perhaps even interviews with your neighbors. He said none of that would be a problem. I swallowed. So he's trying to take the house. Not just the house Darius said, your accounts, your car, everything. If he gets guardianship, you'd lose the legal right to make your own decisions. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at my hands. The same hands that once held Ronan's feverish body through childhood. The same hands that pulled hair from drains, scrubbed blood from tile-rolled dough for tamales, signed my husband's death certificate, held the deed to this house. I want to fight, I said simply. Darius nodded. Once. Then here's what we do. We set the plan in motion that afternoon. He arranged for a certified geriatric specialist, someone he trusted, to come evaluate me. Quietly, professionally. I agreed. I wasn't afraid of being seen clearly. My mind was still mine. He also brought small recording devices. One for the kitchen, one for the living room, one for the hallway outside my bedroom. They looked like ordinary home gadgets. He showed me how to use my phone to record if I needed to. Keep your voice calm, he said. Let them talk. The more they say, the stronger your case. Then he asked if I had a will. I said no. By the end of the day, we started drafting one. A legally fortified document that would ensure everything I owned went where I wanted when I was gone. I can't promise they won't try again, Darius said, standing to leave. But next time they won't be walking into a vulnerable woman's house. He paused at the door, looking at me not with pity, but with a quiet kind of respect. They'll be walking into a trap, and I'd be waiting. They came back on a Sunday. I knew they would. Darius had said they'd try again once the silence stretched too long. This time I saw the strategy before they even stepped out of the car. Cambria was dressed in soft pastels, her hair pulled back neatly. Ronan wore a navy sweater, the kind he always wore for family photos. And behind them, their 2 children stepped out, each holding a small gift-wrapped box. Guilt. They walked up the path like a parade of good intentions. I had coffee already brewed my hands, steady the recording app on my phone, running silently in my apron pocket. Mama Ronan said as he leaned in for a kiss on the cheek. We brought lunch. We thought it'd be nice to eat together, just us. The kids were polite. They handed me their gifts, drawings of hearts, a clay dish made at school. My heart clenched. They didn't know. They were tools in a plan they couldn't understand. We sat. I served coffee. Cambria smiled too much. Selena, she began sweetly. We've been thinking more about what we talked about last time. We really want what's best for you. And after what happened last week, we're more concerned than ever. I tilted my head. What happened last week? Ronan cleared his throat. You forgot to turn off the gas, remember? The neighbor had to come tell you. A lie. No such thing happened, Cambria added quickly. And the fall in the bathroom. You had a bruise on your arm. I witnessed it. I had no problems with my arms. There was a reason I wore short sleeves that day. Reaching into his bag, Ronan took out the identical folder, only fatter this time. Everything is right here. The power of attorney for asset transfers and the senior living arrangements. It's an amazing location. Clean and safe. They even provide gardening courses. Cambria also introduced spa days. Bingo. It resembles a resort. He placed a pen next to the papers, and I glanced down at it while sipping my coffee. I grabbed it. I kept my hand above the first X-marked line. I set the pen down after that. I've been thinking too. Silently, I said. I also want to show you something. I took the envelope Darius had prepared for me out of the drawer next to the refrigerator. I spread the contents on the table after carefully and gently opening it. First, the official date and signature of the medical assessment. Complete mental ability. No indications of degradation. Confusion mounting, Ronan's eyes darted over the page. The second was the letter from Darius explaining Ronan's investigation into my mental incapacity. Cambria became pallid. The voice recording comes next. I hit the play button. They were really clear in their voices. Like a maid, but with family, she can sleep in the tiny room. Cambria let out a gasp. Ronan grabbed the telephone. I withdrew it. The front door opened, and Darius entered with his own manila package in hand, composed and self-assured. Duarte, Ronan. He indicated that you are officially being served with a notice of intent to pursue legal charges for elder abuse and financial exploitation, as well as a cease and desist. Ronan froze. Cambria got up from her chair so quickly that she almost toppled it. "This is crazy!" she yelled. "She has no idea what she's doing." I gave her a glance. Next, at Ronan. I also communicated in a way that even the kids could comprehend. "I'm not a burden to you. Your victim is not me. Your retirement plan does not include me." Ronan's expression contorted. Cambria opened her mouth to say anything else, but Darius held up his hand. "We advise you to depart." They didn't previously, but they did now. Ronan turned to face me again, and I saw it in his eyes. Not sadness, not remorse, fear. At last he realized that I didn't fear him. He was correct. No, I wasn't. It's been 6 months. The tomatoes have grown in height. Along the fence, I planted a row of wildflowers and rosemary. Like the air surrounding me, the garden is fuller. When I wake up, I don't have that weight behind my ribs or any stiffness in my shoulders. Every morning, I give the earth some water and give thanks for its growth, stability, and ability to hold me here. Ronan accepted the offer, a permanent mark on his record and community work in an assisted living facility. According to Darius, it was the best course of action for me and the grandkids. I concurred, not because I was forgiving, but because I knew what justice meant to me: complete, solid, and quiet. Ronan may not fully comprehend the extent of what he attempted to get from me. However, I viewed the pictures that were supplied to me. He now serves meals to individuals who remind him of what he was willing to erase, pushes wheelchairs along long halls, and wears scrubs. Perhaps he's picking up some knowledge. Perhaps not. I have no say in the matter. News of what transpired spread. Not just in whispers at church, but also in chats between moms and daughters, as well as between neighbors across fences in grocery aisles and waiting rooms. Unknown women started to arrive at my gate. One, then another. They arrived with teary-eyed documents and queries. One sat at my kitchen table bringing homemade flan and said that her son had created a bank account under her name. I began lending a hand where I could. Telephone numbers, legal actions, permission on an emotional level to refuse. You're not self-centered. You're not insane. You're not by yourself. Darius occasionally stops by to provide updates. He assisted me in revising my will. This residence will be donated to an organization that provides safe havens for elderly women after I pass away. Before the garden and before this house, women like me. I had the right to defend what was mine before I realized. I received a letter from my grandchildren last week. Ernest, the penmanship was crooked. They expressed regret for the incident, that when they're older and able to come by themselves, they hope to see me again. The letter was read twice by me. After that, I carefully folded it and put it in my recipe box. When they're ready, let them come. I'll be present. The only thing the garden needs is attention. In any case, it expands. On certain days, I wonder if I'm just silently blossoming, beyond what I believed was feasible. This morning, I stood at the edge of the flower bed with pruning shears in hand, pulled my hair up, and put on my softest shoes. My knees groped, my fingers shook a little. I had a straight back, though, because I've finally realized that this isn't the end at age 69. This is only the start.